Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. Bow hair on my microphone. We'll discard that. Phil Perry will join in just a moment. Today, what are we going to get into? We're going to talk a little bit about that Brady roast. Calvin Anderson. We have a little more intel on what exactly his illness was last year and his hopes for 2024. The football poobah search, rookie minicamp, and the much anticipated schedule release for 2024. But let's start with that football poobah search. Patriots, as Phil and I reported at the end of January, are going to have an open search. And the Patriots talked about that openly for their new personnel head. Now, speaking to Robert Kraft about this publicly and privately, I kind of said, why are you doing that? Why are you going to let a guy run the draft, run free agency, and then turn around in May or June and start opening up a GM search? And I wasn't really given a plausible reason, but my understanding at the time was, just based on connecting the dots, was the Patriots had to satisfy the Rooney Rule. Well, as it turns out, Jonathan Jones from CBS reports the Patriots have indeed begun this open interviewing process for a new GM. Ben Volin reports that the Patriots have actually satisfied the Rooney Rule already. So if we're to believe Ben's reporting, why in God's name are they doing a search when it's pretty clear Elliott Wolf is going to be the GM? As Phil mentioned yesterday, people he had talked to confirming again, Elliott Wolf's the guy. Now the Patriots have individuals from around the league who are saying, you know what, we don't want to take that interview. You know, it's the sham interview stuff that Brian Flores brought a lawsuit against the NFL about. So the individuals are Trey Brown from the Bengals and the Cardinals VP of player personnel, Quentin Harris. Both have turned down interviews with the Patriots. So to me, I'm like, what are you doing? What's the exercise? What's the point? I just can't get behind the whole goofiness of this exercise of having people in after you've already sailed out with a different captain. So to me, what benefit does it serve the Patriots? It's not going to matter in wins and losses in September and October, but what do you need a headline out there for that this guy doesn't want to come in and talk to you about your football poobah opportunity? It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't help you. I mean, they'll survive. It's not going to hurt the wins and losses, but it's just a little head shake and an eyebrow raise. What is you doing? Now we bring in the Senator Phil Perry, who is down for Patriots Access today with Demario Douglas and Christian Gonzalez. God, he looks good. He looks like a Kennedy. Hey, guy.
Hey, Tom. What's up? Just hanging out here outside Gillette Stadium because there's no great place to do it inside Gillette Stadium. People actually at this very moment still waiting on Pop Douglas. So we got Christian Gonzalez. No Pop yet. So I'm here with you, eschewing our Pop Douglas opportunity just to be with you, my friend.
I appreciate you. What to make of the Patriots' logic behind having this executive search after having already gone through this offseason, especially when Ben Volin's reporting that they've already satisfied the Rooney Rule?
Yeah, interesting report there because I believe Jonathan Jones reported yesterday that they had only just begun the search. And it's my understanding with the Rooney Rule, it's got to be two external minority candidates in person who have to be interviewed. So maybe they got the word out earlier than indications had been given to us, and they've already passed a few people through the building here. But we know of a couple of spurnings, I guess, interviews.
Yeah, Trey Brown and Quentin Harris. They both said, yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And I get it, right? I mean, it is so widely viewed, Tom, based on the people that I've spoken to, people who would be well aware of what's going on with the situation right now. It is so widely viewed that this is Elliott Wolf's job. I think outside of just getting the experience, which there's something to be said for that, but outside of that, I'm not really sure why you would interview for the job if you have an understanding already that the job's going to someone else.
Yeah.
So this is a source of frustration for a lot of different people, whether it's executives, head coaches. The Rooney Rule is there with good intentions, but it also leads to, at times, situations where people feel as though their time is being wasted. And I think that's why some of the people that have been invited to interview have opted not to.
Yeah, which is in essence, when it comes down to it, a part of what the Brian Flores lawsuit brought against the NFL is all about. to a great extent, is the sham nature of these interviews. But, you know, I'll say this, over the course of 17 years, Bill Belichick more than earned the right with unconventional ideas and actions that worked out in the end, where you eventually suspended disbelief. Yeah, he knows more than me. He knows better than I do. I mean, that's how the whole "in Bill we trust" mantra came into play. Cut Jamie Collins, you know, trade Jamie Collins, fine. Trade Logan Mankins, fine. It'll work out. It always does. But I don't see that level of, I just don't see the upside. Didn't see the upside in those. Don't see the upside in going through this exercise. You're not releasing a player or moving on from a player, but it's harder for me to suspend disbelief and say it'll all work out when I can't see the point.
Yeah, and Tom, you're not the only one. You know, I've spoken to people and, you know, in the last 24 hours that have basically said, why again did they wait until now to do this? Why couldn't they do this when everyone else was doing it? And what I was told at the time was, well, it's too much. It's just all too much for all this to all happen at the same time. It's just a little too much. You know, Bill Belichick's gone, Jerod Mayo's taking over. But it's been pointed out to me by people in the league, they didn't even go through a real head coaching search. There are teams all the time that go through both of these searches in one off season in January. And yeah, is it a lot? Is there a lot to do? Is there a lot to get accomplished? Sure. But the Patriots checked one box by having it written in Jerod Mayo's contract that he was going to succeed Bill Belichick as head coach. So they didn't even have to worry about a head coaching interview. So I think there are people in football now who look at it and say that excuse of, well, we just didn't want to do too much all at the same time as an illegitimate one, because they had plenty of time to go through a proper process at the more typical time, and they opted not to. And now, listen, if they're getting criticized, whether it's in the league or in the media, et cetera, like, I think it's fair, because the timing of this does not make much sense at all.
Yeah. And especially in the wake of Bill Belichick, who, again, over the course of 2000 to 2017, oozed competency. You don't want to get into this period of time, and Bill still lived on that oozing of competency, even though there were occasions he couldn't find his ass with both hands in the last 7 years. But be that as it may, this is oozing incompetency. When you don't have a head coaching search, and fine, Mayo was your guy from Jump Street, that's fine. And you're not going to have an executive search because you think everybody's been muzzled and it's too much to bring in foreign ideas post Bill. Those aren't persuasive reasons. I believe you when you say Mayo's the right guy. I believe you when you say Elliott Wolf is highly competent and we're wildly impressed with all he's doing. But that's not exactly kicking over every stone to make sure that you continue to hit the ground running. This is a team that is 31 and 44 since the middle of 2019. It's one of the worst teams in the league at this juncture. So, for their sake, hoping that this unconventional way of doing things works out. But again, they have thrown out the instruction manual. It's gone. And they're just kind of working off site.
And I think it's just that, again, just to reiterate, the timing is just odd. There's no, could they not have just done this, even if it is a dog and pony show? Could they not have done this in January when you would have had more people willing to interview at that point, because it would have looked and felt like more of a legitimate process, even if you felt like at the time, it's too much to change everything. Okay, go into it with the idea that you're going to just stick with Elliott Wolf and he's going to be the guy, but at least go through it at that point. Not only does it do you favors as an organization, it does Elliott Wolf favors. It makes him a more legitimate person when he's sitting in that seat with a new title, going through free agency, going through the draft, and you're not dealing with the optics issues that you're dealing with now. That's all.
Yeah. And I mean, having asked Robert Kraft directly, why in God's name would you do that? I wasn't really afforded a great answer. It was more of a, well, what would you do? I basically said, not that. I'd hire the guy. Be that as it may. Let's skip on down now to the Brady roast. And it actually dovetails kind of neatly because I think that this is, again, Robert Kraft's a great owner, but this is an instance of him wanting to have his cake and eat it too at the Brady roast. Not so much with, hey, please, Tom, make sure that I'm not having a million massage and Orchids of Hawaii jokes. Orchids of Asia? Asia or Hawaii? We had Orchids of Hawaii in Lakeville. Just closed. Great place. Be that as it may. That's the third be that as it may. 4. With that, it's not him trying to have his way with that. I don't blame him. Tom, you want me to come? I'll come, but they're going to kill me for the massage stuff. No, I'll tell him not to say anything. So I get that. It's if Kevin Hart calls you up for a cringy toast, read the landscape of what just went on with Bill and don't lean into the microphone and give an over-the-top flowery salute to the man that you just fired. Go along, understand that Bill's uncomfortable with it, give him a pat on the shoulder, a sheepish grin, and get back. Don't say how great he is when you just fired him. I think that was what made Bill's face kind of go. He didn't want to do it in the first place. He gets up there and has to see that and knows he's going to go home and wonder where his unemployment check is. I can't imagine he filed for unemployment. But don't do that. You can't have it both ways. Phil?
You can't.
Leave it alone.
Clearly, that's what he's hoping for in that instance. And, I don't know. Is it you're almost 3 hours into the event? Do you just sort of let your inhibitions go and say whatever is moving you at the moment? It didn't feel like there's a whole lot of pre-planning going on there at that point in time. Maybe you got to think about that ahead of time. This is what I'm going to say if I get the opportunity. If I don't, I'm not going to force it. It just it didn't felt all that calculated.
Yeah. Just know how the other guy's going to feel.
Right.
Just know how the other guy's going to feel if you dip your head into the mic and tell everybody how unbelievable he is. Read the room. Meanwhile, further on the Brady roast, less on the jokes, which were enjoyable, offensive, over the top, beyond any realm of there were things in there I wouldn't say to you in privacy, like that kind of vein of just meanness. God bless. And we get after each other, but the notion of hatchet burying between Bill and Tom that continues to rise every time either one of them says something nice about it. I don't get it. I mean, this is like the 6th hatchet burial that we have to go through where people say, see, they love each other. We know they love each other. The hatchet was buried in September of 2021. Every time they're in the same room, we don't have to talk about, see, they do love each other. You guys are wrong. We already have reams of evidence that it was dysfunctional and probably worse than we knew. Tom's past it. Bill is probably really happy that Tom has passed it. And they live happily forever after with each thing they've given each other. Am I preaching to the choir or just beating a dead horse?
No, I think you're right. I think you are preaching against the beating of said dead horse. I think that's what you're doing here, which I totally understand. I think it's just, I think the Dynasty docuseries, Tom, plays a huge part in how this thing was received, because that did seem to drudge up a variety of emotions for fans. And looking back at just how difficult it was at times for these guys and how they may have felt for each other, even though within that series, you have Tom Brady practically in tears saying it was perfect. It was perfect. It went the way it should have gone. And essentially he's telling us that the hatchet has been buried. But I think after a lot of people had the opportunity to watch that whole series and then they see this again, it is cathartic for fans. I don't think it is for them, but I think it is for fans.
Truth was spoken in jest a few times, which was great. Bill took out a grievance with Danny Amendola because even if he didn't watch the series, it certainly got back to old Bill, that Danny had been a dink to him and gave him a critical review, 1 star on Yelp.
We worked for Bill, but we played for Tom.
Right. That's a tough one. And, I think the truth was also spoken in jest, where if you hit Bill with the truth serum, say, look, It was me and it was Tom, but it was because of me. He's right. I've said a million times, 2010 to 2019 was Tom Brady. He was 70-30, the driver. But it was probably 70-30 Bill to Tom, and definitely 90-10 Bill to Tom from 2000 to 2005. And then Tom took over the second half of the decade. Then he really took over the next one. But it's because of Bill that it happened.
Because he drafted him, brought him in, coached him up,
Believed in him,
had the right coaches in place, made the choice to go with them in the first place when Bledsoe gets hurt. Yeah, I think that's all completely fair. It's completely fair. It does. There's a little hint of like, okay, well, you are the guy who always used to say that, coaches lose games, players win them, right? So I'm not saying he shouldn't be taking credit. He obviously should get credit. But it felt like that was one of his messages, was that he didn't want credit at the time, at least publicly. That's something that he would say. So that little,
but that was the truth. He knows, I know, we all know that the Patriots of 2000 went through a 5-11 season and started the next year 0-2, but they survived because of Bill. Bill going to Tom, Bill having the balls to bench Drew, Bill doing all the things that he did, and Pioli and everybody else. But
it's funny to hear both guys wanting their flowers now, even though it's a roast. I get it. But there is some truth to everything that these people were saying. So Bill saying, because of me, Tom leaning into the fact that he's the GOAT when he, for a long, long time, wanted to stiff arm that word anytime he heard it because it just made him uncomfortable. A little time passes and everybody wants to be appreciated.
Yeah.
We're all wired similarly.
It was funny too, because there was a point at which Belichick said that he ran out of time to praise Brady. And Brady's expression in nodding and putting his eyebrows up was like, yeah, well, status quo. I mean, they were true to themselves, but they were true to the fact that I've been with this person for 25 years. I know how he is. It's like when someone busts my balls about being overly emotional and combustible. That's okay. I know how I am. Right, Phil?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Fair enough. Hey, good news on the Calvin Anderson front. We now know what his ailment was. I think that's good because now we know it wasn't an injury, a vertebrae, anything like that. He had an illness. He had malaria. Would have been good intel to have as we were heaping him into the free agent failures throughout last season, but injuries are not something we talk about, nor malaria.
Malaria, I guess infectious diseases fall under that umbrella as well. Can't be allowing other teams to know that you had malaria after traveling to Africa. You never know what kind of competitive disadvantage that could put the team into.
Do you think Calvin Anderson can have an impact at a tackle position this year?
I had him on my 53-man roster when I did my roster projection last week. He is somebody who at a position where they need help, I think could, if he's healthy, give them help. I mean, he was in position to potentially start for them last year until this all went down. Now, does that mean he is a bona fide, established, end of the line pass protector? No, but he has played a fair amount of football and at a professional level, which is more than a lot of NFL players. Right. Which is more than a lot of guys on the roster could say right now at that position. So if he's healthy, that has the potential to be important for this year's team. I will say that. I am not ruling out that he plays and plays a lot for the Patriots this year.
Rookie minicamp. To me, this weekend we get 1 day of access. And what will be interesting to observe for me is who is closest to Drake May and the division of labor between McAdoo, McCartney, and Alex Van Pelt.
That's a good one. I like that one because you've got two legitimate quarterback whisperers there and a first-time quarterbacks coach. I wonder, the other thing that's just so fascinating about this for me is that what we have seen here in New England for many years, Tom, is that the established offensive coordinator sort of takes the starter.
Yep.
Takes the starting quarterback and runs the offense with that guy. When the quarterback's coach or the assistant quarterback's coach, whether it's Jerry Shaplinsky or Bo Hardigree or anybody else, sort of gets the younger guy, Evan Rothstein. You could throw him in there. Mm-hmm. Gets the younger player, the newer player to get them, to get their feet wet, get them up to speed. And I wonder if that's how it will look with TC McCartney and Alex Van Pelt / Bob McAdoo. Although, Tom, the guy you need to get most up to speed is the guy you just invested the 3rd overall pick in. So you give a Jacoby Brissett to Alex Van Pelt, and then it's just Drake May and Joe Milton off to the side with TC McCartney. I'm not sure that's a great idea either. So I love that little storyline for us to track. It's not a little one, but that's what we should be watching when we.
And that's why I think the presence of McAdoo is good. TC McCartney can be there, but McAdoo is on the earlobe of Drake May. Just here's what we're doing. So, Phil, fantastic. You've been outside. You look great. I can't believe the audio is as good as it was. I'm going to let you free.
Okay.
And we're going to run some old Jerod Mayo from Quick Slants, the podcast, and the Patriots Talk podcast. As you know, Patriots head coach Jerod Mayo was a longtime co-host, guest for Quick Slants. We had him on the pod a ton back in the day. So let's roll back the clock, dip into the treasure trove of Jerod Mayo, and look at the November 16th, 2016 podcast that we put out in the wake of Jamie Collins having been traded on Halloween and the Patriots winning a game out in San Francisco against the, at that time, undermanned and overmatched 49ers. There was a lot of talk about leadership and the direction of the Patriots locker room at that time. So we talked to Jerod about his feelings on how Bill would deal with that and got some intel on how Jerod would.
Bill made me second year in the league. I was the only captain during preseason, which was awkward in itself, but it kind of molded me into.
So you're out there by yourself?
I was out there by myself. So I was like, "Hey, you want to kick the ball? Remember, you want to receive?" I would ask him like 5 times before the game because I was scared. I didn't want to screw it up. It was preseason, but I still didn't want to screw it up. But so this is nothing new as far as when things aren't going well, is to start to question leadership and things like that. But you're right. Hightower is the guy. Devin's the guy in the back end. And I think guys look to those. They look to them for support and for guidance.
Jerod, I'm wondering because right now with all of these things that have happened, whether it's Collins trade, the Branch suspension, I think there are some people who wonder, has either with some of these moves or just by the fact of who he is, has Belichick quote unquote lost the locker room? That's something I've heard a couple of times over the last week or so. What makes players want to play for Bill? Is that something that even factors into the equation? Are players just expected to be so self-motivated that doesn't factor in?
I think winning games, guys, they love winning games. And to win games in this league, even against a San Francisco 49ers team who was terrible, but it's still hard to do, right? But I tell guys all the time, if you love to play football and you don't always need that pat on the back, then you're going to be one of Bill's guys. I'm just going to there was a player, probably, I'm trying to think, would he be Hall of Fame? He might, I don't know. He's borderline, right? Came here free agent. I'm not going to say his name. But I remember in the cafeterias during training camp, and, he made a couple plays in practice during training camp. And he came to me, he said, Jerod, why doesn't Bill say anything to me when I make a play like good job or something like that? I said, you know what, honestly, if you're doing your job and we hear it all the time, he's not going to say good job for doing what you're supposed to do. He's not. So if you need someone to pat you on your back every 5 seconds, this isn't the place for you. Now, as far as Bill being out of touch with the locker room, he's never been the type of guy to, just hang out in the locker room. Mm-hmm. There is a hierarchy there, which I could always appreciate. This is my coach. I would always treat a coach, with the utmost respect. That's just how I was raised. Mm-hmm. Everyone's not raised the same way, especially through the football ranks or through sporting ranks. I would always hold coaches to high esteem. But what happens is, so Bill is a coach, and I think he's from the old school mentality where I wouldn't say like I'm not your friend, but this is a coach-player relationship.
Boss-employee.
Exactly, and that's how it is. So
he relies on you.
He relies on the captains. So listen,
Slates.
This is what it is. He would rely. So Bill, he would have these captains meetings. Sometimes he would have meetings before on a Friday or sometime during the week. He would tell us the message, and I say us, I mean the captains. He would give us the message, right? And it was our job as a captain to translate that message to some of these other guys who really wouldn't be able to understand it coming from Bill. You see what I'm saying? Because it's a different level of just understanding of the game and what we needed to do to win the game.
Do you think at this point in time, not to sound like, I'm a contemporary of some of the players that are still in that locker room, but it feels like that's an old school mentality in an age where an old school mentality may not resonate with players as much anymore. Are there more and more players, in your opinion, that need that pat on the back every once in a while, or need it a little more?
Definitely. And that killed me in my latter years. I guess I only played 8 years, but it was like I really don't get into social media. Like I don't send out tweets or things like that. But that was like the thing, and like the camaraderie would kind of change because guys would just run to the locker and check their phones. It's like, but this is where it would become a problem is when a guy would come in the locker room and he's down and out. It's like, moping around the locker room. It's like, what's wrong with you? Well, someone tweeted this. I'm like, how do you let Joe Blow sitting on his couch affect your entire day? And Bill's not into social media as well. He, what does he call it? Twitter face or
Twitter face, Snapchat,
Snapface, stuff like that. But it is a different era. It's way past sports at this point.
No doubt, it gets into our heads here. I mean, somebody says you sucked on that show. I did. He's right. He's a prick, but he's right.
Right.
And that's just me.
That's just, I know you.
Just senator on mode.
All right.
And we're good friends.
The question I have is, it's actually it's easiest to relate stuff to your own situation. If somebody irritates my boss, Kevin Miller, and there's some kind of fallout for him, it doesn't necessarily register with me that much until it affects my work. Because everybody has their own operation. I got my family at home. I got my own business I'm taking care of. They have to take care of their own business as well, as close as I might be with them. But the only time their business would intrude on my business is when it affects the way they're performing.
Definitely.
Is that how it works in the locker room? Because you look at this. Well, Jabal Sheard got left behind. Patriots still won the game. I don't know if Van Noy played as well as Sheard would have, or McClellan did, or Flowers did. But they're fine. The guys aren't coming running back and saying, "Jabal, you all right?
All right.
This is so bad."
Yeah.
It's not that way.
It's not.